Ahead of International Women's Day, we at World Roundup are taking a look at how women have been mistreated and violated in the Ukraine war. There are, it cannot be said enough, many women fighting as soldiers. There have been far, far too many women who have been victims of invading Russian aggression. Rape has been used as a weapon, according to investigators who've taken witness testimony, as well as having spoken to many victims of the atrocities. And for refugees fleeing the fighting, almost all, of course, women and children, the most vulnerable, becoming targets for those who are looking to exploit that situation. Well, for more, we're joined by Dr. Henrietta Blackmore, National Director of Habitat for Humanity UK. Dr. Blackmore, thank you very much for joining us. The reports of how Russian soldiers sexually attack Ukrainian women shock the world. Can you confirm for us the extent of these atrocities?
In terms of specifically to do with sexual violence, Habitat for Humanity isn't conducting research on numbers of violence, but we are working very closely with women who have been affected directly, including by providing safe shelter where women can be protected both from ongoing conflict, but also from gender-based violence that may occur in the home, including domestic violence.
Dr. Blackmore, I think it's important for people who are watching to understand the extent of what has happened. And I know it's difficult to repeat what you've been told and the things you've heard, but can you give us some idea of what has been going on?
As I say, Habitat for Humanity isn't directly working with survivors on protection issues, but we are working, as I say, very closely with women and other members of vulnerable communities who've been affected by violence. We know, for example, that women are disproportionately affected by gaps in adequate and safe housing, that conflict exacerbates those risks around violence, forced evictions, other negative consequences to health and well-being. And so it's incredibly important that Habitat, our partners and all decision makers are prioritising provision of safe, immediate shelter for women, children and other family members in these circumstances.
Are you saying your work is primarily with refugees as they're coming away from the fighting? They're the people, women and children, the vast majority, of course, women and children. These are the people you're mostly trying to help.
So Habitat for Humanity and our local partners have been working in a number of different circumstances, both with refugees who need support in Poland, Romania, Hungary, Germany and Slovakia, but also within Ukraine as well, particularly working with people who've been internally displaced, both within their regional communities, but also further afield.
And in terms of providing that kind of habitat that they need, I mean, clearly some people have stepped forward and out of the goodness of their heart, they accepted people into their homes. It didn't quite work out the way it could have. Some people, of course, had a very successful time. It all depended, of course, on the personal dynamic. How could you step in there and help those people there? Because clearly, going into that situation, Ukrainian women, Ukrainian children, girls, would be very vulnerable.
Absolutely. And we know, for example, that in Ukraine, 90% of those who fled the country are women and children, and 61% of internally displaced people are women. That means that female-headed households, as they do in all conflict situations, increase that vulnerability. In terms of the different ways that both Habitat for Humanity and other partners can support those female-headed households in those circumstances, as I say, it's about really stepping up the provision of emergency shelter options that are safe, that really prioritise health, well-being and education needs for those people. But it is also about working with local authorities and decision makers to think about what the long-term needs for safe housing are going to be in terms of reconstruction, in terms of communities, both hosting communities who are receiving refugees and the pressure that it places on them in order to really increase the provision of affordable housing for local communities and for refugees, but also thinking about the needs within Ukraine as well. We know from recent World Bank research, for example, that $56 billion worth of damage has been done to housing stock within Ukraine. That's about 37% of the estimated cost of the conflict so far within Ukraine. And we can imagine just from that number what it's going to take in order to really invest and ensure that safe, affordable housing is prioritised within reconstruction plans.
Indeed, that reconstruction, of course, already underway. Dr. Blackmore, thank you very much indeed for giving us that context of the situation ahead of International Women's Day, of course, the plight of women